Jason Murphy, we are live. This is an IT support group and IT MSP entrepreneurs. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Stetson. It's good to be back.
Fantastic. Oh,
I
I
think
have
I
some
think this is our
background audio.
fifth podcast, and well, in this podcast format, I think this is like the fifth or sixth one we've done.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a little while. I've been talking with
It has
Lewis
been.
Pope on, I think, security stuff lately. But Jason, we should get right to it. Looks like we have some folks filling in here.
Cool.
You are, of course, a head nerd at Enable.
hmm
Um, what else are you? Do you want to give a quick little introduction?
Well, it's funny because I do a lot of stuff for Enable, but I asked ChatGPT what I do at Enable as a head nerd, and it actually listed out 40 different things, and I can tell you uh, AI knows what I'm doing better than I do.
Okay. What did it have? Anything
Well, it, it,
exciting?
it it knows that I also help our leadership team here at Enable kind of steer our product vision. So I formerly worked at MSPs in the past in IT departments, so I take a lot of that practitioner journey that I have and kind of implement it internally. I also relate to a lot of our partners, so I run a community on Slack and on Reddit as well. So if you want to go to
Yeah, what are
r
those?
slash
Plug it.
enable, check out r slash nibble. I run that community, or as much as I can. There's some other people, including Lisa, our senior manager for community, and another guy his name is Nick. So they kind of help. We all kind of try to respond and get as much help for our partners and address their questions whenever we can.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's funny you asked AI what you do. I've been trying to figure out what it is I do, and I'm not sure AI can help me. But today, Jason, we're talking about PSA
We
and
are.
not public service announcement.
No,
Oh, this might be a public service announcement. This is this is professional services automation, and I
professional
think we
services
should,
automation. Yes.
yeah, we should get right into it. Can you like, what is PSA? Who would want to use this type of thing?
Sure.
What's this all about?
So I would also like start this conversation off with saying PSA is just not a really great term for what PSA is. Um, a PSA was built, I would say, probably 20 plus years ago. So that name, that moniker is kind of carried forward for probably the last 24, 25 years. Um, PSAs, while called professional services automation, is that once upon a time, that's really what MSPs were. They were just professional services. We didn't have the focus in IT managed services like we do today. That was an evolution, roughly around, I would say, 10-ish or more years ago. Most MSPs back then were just break fix if they were doing that. So professional services automation is much like what lawyers use for a platform for capturing their professional services. So what professional services are for MSPs is a multitude of different things. It is really your back office as an MSP, right? Now we're going to get into hopefully a little bit later talking about, operational maturity and when you kind of grow out of PSA. But if you are, probably the sub 10 million, you're probably using a PSA platform. Okay, so what happens is that you need things like marketing, you need things like sales, you need things like tickets and time and billing and integrations. And that is really what PSA is there to do, is to encompass that back office so that you can track and record so that you can bill your customer every single month.
Yeah, great definition. It sounds like that's quite a like wide variety of
It is.
things that
It is.
that
It's a
happen.
lot.
Um, and I'd be kind of curious, Jason. You know, are is every MSP using a PSA? Should every MSP be using one?
That is even better question.
A little bit of a leading question.
I would say at some point in an MSP's journey, they quickly figure out that they no longer need a PSA. They kind of outgrow a PSA. In fact, when I worked for an MSP, I was at an MSP when we figured out that we were kind of outgrowing it because we had a dedicated sales platform, we had a dedicated marketing platform. In fact, we wanted better ticketing than what PSAs were able to offer. And I'm not trying to slag on PSAs. There are some fantastic PSAs on the market. So that evolution is actually not carrying over as fast because now PSAs are doing, and we're going to hopefully talk at some point about enterprise service management or IT service management. And that is where, based on your operational maturity as an MSP, what happens is you start wanting to do things like ITIL, right? Follow the framework, the best practice that has been around for, I think, 30 plus years around IT. But it's one of those things where you really want to hone in on your service management, right? Whereas PSAs are really there for um, as a guide. Um, at least that's where they started. Now, there's some PSAs on the market today that are pretty incredible. Enables actually integrating our technology into a particular PSA that is out there from Halo. So Halo PSA and Enable have now created an integration, which is set to go generally available in the not so distant future. Um, but just to talk a little bit about that integration, because I know at some point we need to talk about like AI. So I'll drop a little bit of that now.
Yes, of
Um,
course.
is that Halo PSA actually has an AI engine built into it, and what happens is it starts reading the ticket, right, in terms of just Chat GPT or maybe whatever the OpenAI is, um, but it's looking through those tickets and then suggesting a form of automation that that tech can control. So basically, it'll say, "Hey, do you want to do X, Y, or Z? Let's choose Y." Click, and then what happens is that an API action is then created into our RMM product called N-Central, and then bidirectionally we send back ticket information from the RMM into Halo PSA. So it does this whole round trip workflow, and that is really what PSAs are really great at. It's workflow or what we call orchestration. I mean, that's really what it's a fancy automation term for it, but sounds like good marketing. But it's one of those things where you've got task-based automation, which is really kind of the arena I think you and I play in a little bit. Like we do the scripted-based automation, whereas orchestration automation is much more um, back and forth in terms of workflow, right? You're doing more conditionals. You're trying to um, like build a VM, right? Like that's something like ServiceNow can do. So it's one of those things where when we start, and just to kind of circle back, when we start outgrowing that PSA and looking for things like ITSM or even enterprise service management (ESM), like ServiceNow, for example, is you want to start running all of your business like IT, right? Once upon a time we used to think IT was a cost center. It is no longer a cost center, it's a value center. I think we all get that as IT people. But again, 25 years ago when I started in IT, we were looked as a cost to the business. Like it's almost like disparaging once upon a
Yeah,
time.
it really is, and that's
It was.
I think of course a tough place to be. I mean, if you're a managed services provider trying to sell your services looked at as a cost center, nobody wants that. They want value to be added, of course. Jason, I do want to take a moment to
Yeah,
highlight
sure.
a comment from Ari. It says, "What does PSA do or perform that Insight does not provide?" Any clarification on the distinctions there?
I think they're talking about Insight, our other RMM. And yes, I shouldn't have just dropped N-Central as our only RMM. I'm the N-Central guy, so selfishly, yeah, that's kind of like my baby. But Insight also has ticketing integrations. Now we haven't done a Halo integration with Insight yet, but that will come later on this year for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get back to it because I was quite interested in some of these pieces. We have many paths we could go down,
Mhm.
but one, Jason, that I think I didn't know, or maybe many folks might have not. The PSAs could be kind of the ticketing solution as well, right? Is this like the primary interface with customers, or
Well, yeah, from a technical perspective, what happens is that when you're in managed services, and you have a technician, a fleet of technicians, you're working with a customer, is that you need to record what you're doing, right? And primarily, you need to start tracking your time and effort, right, as an MSP, because there's labor costs, right? which is the biggest expense, most likely the biggest expense for any managed services labor. That's why managed services are so centered around automation, because they're trying to reduce as much of that labor cost as they can, or at least try to do more with the labor cost, right? So primarily, ticketing is about recording the information that you're doing for that customer, also assigning time to that and effort so that effectively you can bill it. Now, some as a break fix, you can bill it as an invoice, that particular ticket. However, when you're doing kind of all you can eat managed services, what you do at basically the end of the month is kind of show how much effort that you've put into that customer and do a roll up, right? So if you're charging that customer $1,500 or $2,000 a month, but you've also spent $3,000 in labor, you can quickly understand that that's not a very profitable business, right? So you have to
Yeah.
adjust for these things.
Good thing to know early on. It sounds
Absolutely.
like lots of business statistics and different reports and things
Hmm.
are possible that I want to dive into. But I am seeing more comments here from Ari. Want to get back to his
Hmm.
question. He says, "Sorry, question applies to InCentral, I guess." And then follow up: What is the integration going to do or provide? Still not sure how Insight and InCentral are not PSA.
Okay, so another antiquated term is RMM. So, and Central or Nsight do remote management and monitoring, RMM. However, RMM has grown over, again, that past 25 years. I mean, PSA and ticketing and RMMs have been kind of created around the same time, right? Most of them are, I mean, early on were around the year 2000. Um, so when it comes to PSA, professional services automation, you have to make a distinction. You manage your customers using RMM. What you do is, as a technician, you need to record your effort within a PSA because it's your back office, right? That is where you, again, can do your invoicing for your customers. So one's very business focused and the RMM is more technically focused. This is where you do automation, patch management, third party push of applications, patching of those third party applications. RMMs are a beast amongst themselves, and that's a whole other podcast, I'm sure. But it's one of those things where PSAs take care of the business side of things. Hopefully that makes more
Yeah.
sense, Ari.
Awesome. Ari, thanks for the question. Yeah, feel free to follow up and anybody else watching, drop your comments. Jason, I think that was a great distinction. I am super interested in some of these, like, just I'm a business nerd, I guess.
Mhm.
So that's what's really interesting to me about PSAs. Yeah, let's follow up with Ari. So deploying an automation isn't PSA, but documenting that you've deployed the automation is PSA.
Well, it's not just
Close.
about documenting. There's a document tool you may have as an MSP. Again, that operational maturity is really important. When you start out in your first year, you typically have to buy an RMM or a PSA, or maybe both if you can afford them.
Can we
But
do a
then,
prerequisite definition here of the term operational maturity, just so we're all on the same page?
sure, sure. I mean, it's hard to quantify what OML is, our operational maturity. But basically, what happens is that through the life cycle of your business, you start operating maturely, like a kind of unoptimized IP or MSP. So what happens is you're doing things correctly, operationally. You're becoming more profitable. You're gaining more revenue. Your sales team is growing. Those kinds of things. So operations become more mature. Whereas when you're starting out as an MSP, you're kind of just like you'll take business wherever you can find it, right? Because you need that money to grow, to hire more labor, to get a salesperson. So you're not as operationally mature. And again, if you want to Google this stuff, it's all online, but you can look for operational maturity for an MSP, and there's a little chart. You can see where 0 is kind of like chaotic and 5 is like service based. So it's all that important stuff that MSPs are really focused on. But to answer your question, Ari, so deploying an automation isn't PSA, but documenting that you've deployed the automation is PSA. I would say neither, right? What happens is when you fix problems for a customer, or when you're deploying a server, or they've purchased a laptop from you, or they've made a request of some sort, what happens is you create a ticket, a software-based ticket where you can record. It has a number, you put a subject, kind of like what you would with Word, and then you record what you've done. As technicians, when we troubleshoot things, we need to record the effort behind what we do, the time we spend on that particular problem. What did I do? I went into services.msc. I went into processes. I ended the process. Oh, Chrome was the problem. I uninstalled the crappy extension that somebody put in there, and everything is now working. Okay, that took me 15 minutes. Okay, what you do is record your time and your effort, and then what happens is later on that can be potentially invoiced as a billable for that customer. So hopefully, anyways, that makes a little bit of sense.
Awesome. Yeah, and for folks, as just kind of a little bit of a sidetrack, there's a book
Mhm.
called The E-Myth Revisited by a guy named Michael Gerber that talks about kind of working on your business rather than in it. I would really recommend it. I think a lot of what we're chatting about today with PSAs really kind of intersects with that and shows how you can grow.
Well, it
You know,
definitely has to do
big,
with operational maturity for sure, because when you start
yes,
out, you're working in and on the business. You have to kind of do both. Like,
baking the
um,
bread and selling it, so to
that's
speak.
it. That's it for sure. And that's the divide. Like when you get operationally mature, halfway there, you typically go, okay, as a business owner, I now need to focus on the business, not just in the business and working for it. Typically, you'll hire for that. You'll hire a director, or you'll hire a director of sales, or what have you, right? There's no kind of one answer. It depends if the business owner is technical minded or business minded, or if there's two different owners, those kinds of things. So, but yeah, operational maturity plays a huge role in what you just described for sure.
Fantastic. Let's get to just one more comment here. We'll go back to our
Mhm.
kind of mainline conversation. Ari asked, "Are these questions public?" Yes, they are. And if you have questions, please drop them because I think everybody learns from them. And then one was from ATH Streams. How does one company know with automation? I think you're asking, how do you know if you're outgrowing automation tools? Let me know if that's right. But
Yeah. So when I was
Jason,
talking
any
about
comments there?
yeah, so when I was talking earlier about outgrowing a PSA. So when that back office system that does all the sales and marketing, and it's also your CRM, right? You're recording your customer names and all of the contacts and all the conversations and phone numbers. It's your Rolodex. So again, I'm not describing PSA probably as well as I probably should, but it's one of those things. They do a lot of different things for that business, for that MSP business. Now, when an MSP starts to outgrow the PSA is when they start going, okay, I'm now operationally mature. I don't find like my PSA is that all in one product is doing the exact same thing that another best in class product might do. So what I'll do is a tech evaluation, and I'm gonna focus on marketing only because I spend a little bit of time with our marketing team, and I kind of know how they operate. So when you're an MSP and you're using this all-in-one marketing tool, um, you start going, well, is there a better tool out there? And then you start evaluating those tools and going, okay, that's what I want. I want HubSpot, right? I want the cream of the crop marketing platform so that I can obviously market my business, social media, what have you, just much more better. So that is the divide. And then you start going, okay, well, there's Salesforce. There's another sales platform I want to do. So you start lessening the value around PSA because you start disparating into these best of class tools. And then you're like, okay, well, if all I have left is ticketing, what is the PSA really doing for me? Is there now a best in class ticketing solution? And then we start evolving into IT service management, which is the cream of the crop when it comes to delivering IT service. Okay. So no longer is it ITSM a back office because it's not. ITSM is just purely focused on, the technical portion of service delivery. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I think that was an awesome clarification. And let me ask a little bit, Jason. So, kind of what you're
Mhm.
saying is, as MSPs or organizations outgrow PSAs, they kind of unbundle these little components that are included in the PSA, and perhaps move to a tool that's very niche and does that thing very well. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's
Cool.
happened like I told you when I worked for the very large MSP, it was a top 20 MSP um, globally, is I was there when they realized, okay, we have marketing tools, we have a dedicated sales tool, we have a CRM in our sales tool. What do we really need this PSA for? And then we were like, okay, well, maybe we need a better ticketing tool, right? And we obviously brought that in when we brought in ServiceNow, and we implemented ServiceNow, and you know, still with them today.
Great. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that sounds like a fantastic problem to have for your MSP to outgrow a PSA. But let's get back a little bit to maybe MSPs that are just searching for PSA at the
Mhm.
moment. Like they're kind of exploring, not really sure. But Jason, what's some features or things they
Mhm.
should look out for to evaluate kind of what's on the market?
Yeah, well, I always tell people no two MSPs kind of operate the same way. I always, when I used to do technical demonstrations, either for Enable for other companies, or when I was at an MSP and I was doing my own technical due diligence on technology, I would always kick the tires, right? Like it's one of those things where you have to try before you buy, right? And sometimes, when it comes to software vendors, they're very pushy. They'll give you 15 days and they want you to sign or what have you. Take your time, look at the technology and make sure it's going to complement your business, right? Like if you are, service based, but also break fix, you have to accommodate for both of those. Tickets are going to actually be invoiced to your customer, but also you also have to run a managed services business. So and there's some great ones out there, and I keep, kind of name dropping Halo, but it's one of those things where when we start partnering with Halo, you quickly realize like this is a modern UI. This has all of the things I want from a PSA. And there's a reason why Halo does it a little bit differently than everybody else. I'll give another plug for Halo is they actually started as an ITSM solution. So all of that ITIL, all of that process, all of the things that they're really good at is now baked in as a PSA, Halo PSA. And then they obviously built in things like the CRM, right? And then the ticketing and then the billing, so all of that stuff is kind of sitting there and it's in this modern fast UI that a lot of our partners are kind of migrating over to because again some of the PSAs on the market today are a little bit older or they don't complement the business or you can only do a certain amount of workflows or automations in it. There's limitations. So what they want is something fast and modern, and that's where, at least from my perspective, Halo PSA is kind of on the forefront, I would say.
Yeah, awesome. And of course, it looks like Halo PSA, as you mentioned, integrates really well with N-central, right?
Absolutely. And I spent 3 months on that integration with the Halo team. Product manager over at Halo, his name's Morgan, along with a couple product managers on my side, Eugene and Julia. We all kind of collaborated around what should we do to make a kind of a kick-ass integration. Part of my French. But what we did is what we started to do is going, okay, when we started brainstorming, we were like, okay, and Central's great at sending the ticketing information over. We have a bunch of PSA integrations with, for example, Autotask and um, ConnectWise. But we wanted to do more. And Halo was like, well, we're just starting on the forefront of this AI journey. Maybe we could start there. And that's where, they're looking through tickets. They can see the problems. Well, now it all makes sense to maybe do a suggestion around, hey, Enable has all of these automations. Maybe we can link those up, right? Sorry, link those up. And um, and again, through APIs, we can start kicking things off effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my next question is, if I'm a developer and we want to connect my own, Python script running over here, or even something like Zapier. I think is super common.
Mhm.
Is that something that integrates as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's software integration tools. They're called CM. Um, so basically, what happens, Zapier is one. You're basically you've got like a hub that turns into like this integrator. So you can start integrating all of your tools, and that's really where, in my opinion, ServiceNow. I mean, their stock's like $800 a share. They've done it well, from the beginning. Start to recognize that you have to integrate all of your systems. You're as an MSP or as an IT department, you're never going to have a one-stop, fits all. Just it doesn't happen, right? Especially IT departments, they kind of layer on disparate tools based on, the functionality they kind of need help with. If I want a patch manager, I'll go get a patch manager. Or if I want like something to virtualize my IT, I'll go find, VMware or Hyper-V or what have you. But it's one of those things where they'll throw technology at it. Whereas integrators start integrating all of those things so that from an IT business that you have the right visibility, that you can then start reporting, right? You have things like Power BI. Now, Power BI is actually baked right into our RMM product, which I've been really excited about because we now have this analytics platform that takes all of our RMM data, okay? And, because we have all of the asset information, we have service tags, we have serial numbers, we have IPs, we know we have all the monitoring. So we know what's going right and wrong with those devices. So what we've done is baked in Power BI so that we can do things like software inventories, patch compliance, all the important things that an RMM is supposed to do, but more importantly, integrate with that PSA.
Yeah, awesome. I've used Power BI a few times in the past, but this is essentially, lets you build pretty dashboards, which is, I guess,
Yes,
it's a little bit more than that, but
it
you
is a
can
bit more
get
than that.
insights to different things.
Right.
So that's awesome. But one thing, Jason, I wanted to move towards a little bit was we
Mhm.
were talking about. Hopefully, I didn't just lose it. Oh, here it is. Okay, so a little bit back to our operational maturity
Mhm.
discussion. Kind of curious. So I assume that operational maturity is like this spectrum where you're not very operationally mature or very operationally mature. Tongue twister.
Right.
How should MSPs use that to decide which PSA they use? Is that a factor or? Um,
It's a factor,
yeah.
but let's just put it this way. You kinda know when you know. Like, as an MSP, you need, a PSA, at least to start out with, right? So, that's first and foremost, the most important thing. Stetson, I don't know where I just lost you or where I put you here. Give me 1 second. Are you still
Yeah,
with me?
take your time. I'm still with you, I hear you.
I don't know. I was looking
Hey,
for
well
a blog.
worst case, we've got you, so just keep going.
Okay. Well, I was going to try to link in a blog that I wrote, which is there's a two-parter. I'm actually working on the third right now. Is PSA versus ITSM versus ESM, and that this blog is really meant to kind of expose and dial in to why MSPs need to choose one of those three things. Now, when it comes to operational maturity, for example, um, it's one of those things where you start out kind of operationally immature, like I said, break fix. You're trying to get some managed customers, and then over time, you're not as chaotic, right? You're starting to focus on more of the managed business. You may even have to fire some of those legacy break fix customers because now all you want to do is fully managed IT and security. Of course, you have to do security in 2024. As an MSP, you can't not do security as a managed services provider. So
I'd
it's one of
agree.
those things, right? And that again, that's another operational maturity characteristic, if I said that correctly. So security is like when you're operational mature, you're doing security. You have best in class solutions. You have things like Sentinel One from Enable. You have things like Enable MDR, right? Because it's not just looking at the endpoint security, it's looking at everything, switch, firewalls, all of it, right? And then you start looking at all these logs, right? And starting to correlate. And the MDR piece is really about having people like a SOC team figure out like there's something not right here. We're seeing a phishing attempt or whatever it might be. But that's the important part is like kind of understanding. Um, there you are. I found you. So it's just
Awesome.
sorry,
Welcome back.
sorry. Yeah, thank you. But it's one of those things where you get a better understanding in that regard for sure.
Yeah, great. I think I found your blog here, Jason. I put a link if folks just want to, I don't know, try and put that in their URL. But if you just instead Google Jason Murphy enable PSA ITSM ESM, I think you'll find it. It
You
looks
will.
like a really insightful article. It's yeah, kind of talking about this Gartner IT service management thing. I think you were alluding to a little bit before of these levels of like chaotic, oh shit, what's going on, to reactive, proactive, and moving
Right.
towards this managed services model.
But there's also costs to this as well, right? Like you may want the best in breed PSA, but that comes with best in breed pricing, right? So you have to sometimes trickle down to meet the cost of the business, right? Like if you can afford 100 USD per license, right? You can probably get up to the ServiceNows of the world or the Halo PS. Well, Halo's I don't think that expensive, but it's one of those things where you pricing can sometimes be a major factor in why you're choosing your tools, right? Because some are just highly priced. So again, that
For
is
sure.
again an operational maturity thing. If you can't afford that best in class PSA, well then you're probably not as mature as some of your peers, right? Based on your size and revenue and what have you. So
Yeah, absolutely. And Jason, maybe this is my fault. Maybe I missed this earlier, but can we
mhm.
cover a little bit of the distinction between this ITSM or information technology service management thing
Mhm.
versus ESM, which is enterprise service management? What's the difference between those two?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where in IT, we have a lot of abbreviations we have to kind of figure out, right? So I think we've dialed into PSA at this point. We know what PSA does. Like, what does IT service management do that's different than PSA? Again, that is where, again, an ITSM solution will not have sales, it will not have marketing. It is not meant to be your CRM, right? It's meant to be um, ITIL focused, typically ITIL focused. And what it's there to do is really give your technicians a better experience around working with customers and recording that effort and time within that IT service management tickets, right? Because it has better reporting. It's singularly focused on nothing but the IT business within service management. Now, when we start looking at IT service management, that's kind of a broad term. It's not ITSM is not even a great term for what ITSM actually is. Um, and that just is what it is, right? That's the evolution. When it started probably 30 years ago, it was called IT service management. But that's what it is called today, too. So you can find that these platforms don't typically modernize until, and I'm going to get to ESM now, is that ESM is no longer just focused on IT because you can actually run other parts of your business like IT. I'll give you an example. HR, right? Whether you like it or not, sales runs like IT. They have to record the conversation. They have to change it into an opportunity and move it through its motion, through its stages, until they can finally sell the customer. That that's service based. So ESM is solely focused around running your business like IT, enterprise service management, because you start, doing service delivery model within your organization. Okay, so HR starts recording what they're doing, right, and their time and effort. So it's all documented now. It's now become an important piece of the business around documenting what everybody is doing. And then what happens is like as leadership, you start getting into the director level or senior management levels, like now you want to start reporting on some of this, right? You want to start because there's cost to doing business. COGS, for example, cost of goods sold. Like
Yes.
you're spending money on things, but you also have to record the revenue that's coming in, and then hopefully when you overlap the two, you have a little bit of profitability in there, right? Or hopefully a lot. There is a thing called Rule of 40, and Rule of 40 business is really about having that 40% really determine their. I won't get into all the EBITDA and everything else. That's all. I'd have to do research on some of that stuff, and I'm not a
Sure.
finance guy, but it's one of those things where that stuff is really important to a business owner, right? You have to know how you're spending your money and where you're spending money, but also how you're actually being able to pay for that, right, via your revenue through your customers.
Yeah, fantastic. And Jason, just to clarify, this Rule of 40 thing, I'm not a finance guy either. I just play one on the internet.
Oh,
But this kind of is referring to revenue growth and profit margins. Is that
yes,
right?
effectively,
Should
yes.
be around or higher than
And
40%?
typically, it started off in the software industry is like you want 40% profitability, right? Through all of your labor, like Enable has, I think, 1,300 employees, right? So if you're paying, 1,300 people, you need to make sure that you have at least 40% profitability, right? That's really what and I might be simplifying a little bit, but that's really what it's about. You want to make sure that you have positive growth is really what you are trying to do.
Sure. So $1 million in revenue, hopefully 400K in profit. Is that right?
Something like that, right?
Something
You
like
know,
that.
well, I'll
With
be honest. So I've worked from very small MSPs, right? And we had like $60,000 a month in MRR, right? We were still a little break fix. We had some projects on the side, that kept us busy or what have you. But we were $60,000 a month. It's like, we wanted to get into that $2 million business, right? Then we wanted to get into the five, and that's really speaking from a person who's been around MSPs is like once you get to that 5 million point, that's where it gets really tough to get to that 10 million point. You have to make some very important decisions internally. You have to have the right people, right? You have to start changing things up a little bit, operating like the bigger MSPs that are out there. So
Sure. Yeah, kind of scaling up a little bit yeah, figuring out what the, I guess, next systems are.
that's
I
right.
haven't personally built anything like that yet, but hopefully one day. One question I had, Jason, that just, I hope this
Mhm.
isn't out of left field, but as we're talking about this enterprise service management thing, this is, I'm thinking of some of these other like business operating systems. I'm curious, have you heard of, I think there's one called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. There's a book called Traction.
Mhm.
And there's actually one called Scaling Up as well, and maybe some folks are familiar with OKRs if you work for startup or other companies that do like quarterly goals. Um, could you? Am I on the right track with that? Is that kind of what an ESM is, and how does it differ? Is it just for IT companies?
Well, think of it like this. When you look at a professional services automation platform, right? It's really about as a technician recording your time because you're troubleshooting or you've done remote control, you've worked with a customer, we talked about this, you record that within the ticket and you put 30 minutes, whatever. When you start looking at enterprise service management and then parlaying that framework into things like HR or sales or what have you, um, you start realizing that there's efficiencies to be gained by operating as a whole like that. Because what happens if you have, like in your manufacturing, and you have a manufacturing platform? Well, then you've got to integrate your tools together, right? Whereas if you have enterprise service management, much of your business is all encompassed with one platform, thus giving you the insights and the visibility that you need to be able to operate more and more efficiently. That is what enterprise service management is really meant to do. And also, they have things like customer service management, CSM. And I won't get into that too much, but effectively, this is where you get into things like orchestration and approvals. And whenever a request comes in from a customer, it goes through a workflow and then becomes more turnkey as opposed to a whole email back and forth, which is as painful. Nobody wants to do business through email. So it's one of those things where if you're in a company like Enable and there's 1,300 employees and you need a laptop, it might start with a ticket, but somebody has to approve that cost, right? That is what enterprise service management will do. Has all of these different tool sets that allows the business to operate as more and more efficiently.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Thanks for covering that. I was just having a little side conversation here with Ari, who said he had, I think, listened to Traction while driving, and he warned against it because you might fall asleep.
Ah,
Uh, so kind of
I
hard
thought maybe it
sometimes
was
to
my
make.
voice.
No, no, no.
Okay.
But I do want to cover, I guess, Ari's comment here about being a single operator, sole proprietor. Pricing is a huge factor. And Ben Rowland, hey, Ben, longtime friend of the community, but kind of asking, I'm a one man crew or sole proprietor. Would I have an advantage using, a Halo or whatever it may be, or when's the time to pick up a PSA, Jason?
Mhm. For sure. I mean, when you are a one-man show, a one-man shop, as we call it, you can be very nimble, right? You can respond very quickly because it's your business. It's all on you, well, or it's all on Ari to determine his success or livelihood, right? So he can get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and respond to a server incident, or he can hire for it, right? So that is the divide. And then you start going, well, now that I have a person who can respond to server incidents, maybe I need a person on the weekends. Maybe I need someone overnight. Maybe I need a professional services person who knows how to implement servers, right? You start layering in all of these complements to your business. By the way, that is also the biggest challenge when you're starting out is like, when I'm a one man show, who is going to be number two? Do I hire another technician, right? Do I hire a salesperson? Usually, if you're a technical business owner, like maybe probably areas, he's going out knocking on doors, but also trying to fix the problems, is that maybe he needs to spend more time on the business. Maybe Ari is going to be a fantastic salesperson, right? So now he starts hiring technically minded folks. But if he's technically minded, maybe he's actually going to hire a sales guy, right? So you really have to, as a business owner, kind of divide what that is going to look like, right?
Yeah, fantastic. So it
Yeah.
sounds like maybe it's just kind of dependent on the founder's own strengths and weaknesses. Is that right?
That's right, and some people are just business savvy. Like, you've gone to school for business, but you know what? You're kinda technical, right? So you start a technical-minded MSP, but you're working on the business from day one. So the first thing you start doing is hiring techs, complementing that technical business, and then you kinda operate it, right, as a kind of the business founder. Um, and as somebody who's worked with both technical business owners and business focused owners, I can tell you um, operational maturity is around the same. Like they eventually coalesce at one point, um, because you have to, right? If you are a technical business owner, eventually you're going to be business savvy. You kind of just have to be, right? Or you're going to throw
Yes.
away your money, right? So it's one of those things that that is the evolution during the maturity model. Mhm.
Yeah, and the inverse. I think you were mentioning too. If you're just business minded, you will come to understand the tech at least at a workable level. I hope.
Yeah, and if you look at Aries comment, he's like, my least favorite part of the business, right? Is running the business. He wants to deal with the tech. Like he wants to deal with customers. He wants to hear about the problems. I want to fix the problem. He wants to be the hero. Perfect. Well, that person who's going to be number two is going to be someone like a salesperson or somebody who's business savvy, right? That's the number two, right? Now I know we're going off a little topic outside of PSA here, but operational maturity is really important to all of this. So hopefully, this is a complement to our PSA discussion.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And kind of the TLDR or summarize, Jason. I guess when is the time to bring in the PSA? Then is it after you've brought in some of those employees that complement your own skills?
Hmm.
Before that, or just
Yeah. Well, I've
yeah?
I've been asked many, many times over my career is like, why don't you just do this yourself? I mean, you seem to know a lot about it. Like, why don't you just go out and be an entrepreneur and, you know, kind of knock on those doors? And I can tell you, I want no part of that. Like, I have a family. I've got 4 kids, a wife. I like doing a 9 to 5. It gives me a comfortable living. As an entrepreneur, you got to grind, man. Like if I would have known all of this 25 years ago, I'd probably be a really successful MSP. But unfortunately, 25 years ago, I didn't really know a whole lot other than taking calls at a call center. Um, but I do now, right? So being able to teach this to technical business owners or even sales folks, like it's just one of those things where um, it's an evolution, right? So how do you like bring in your PSA, or what is your next tool, or who is your next person? Honestly, that I can't really tell you. I've read a lot about it. I've paid attention to Reddit, r/MSP. I'll give them a plug as well. My friend Calvin. It's one of those things where hiring that number two should be your best compliment. And that can be a tool even. It doesn't have to be human capital, right? What is going to be the next phase of your business? Now, honestly, if I'm Ari and I'm a technical business owner, I'll probably lean towards an RMM because that's where all of my efficiency can be gained. I can actually now scale a bit better. I can actually grow more customers. Now, I'm selfishly saying this because I'm also the RMM guy at N-able. But tickets, there's free ticketing solutions on the market, right? There's no free RMMs on the market, that's for sure. Well, there might be there's I think one low cost or open source one that might be floating around here these days. But at the same point, um, for example, N-able has two best in class RMMs, and that is really the important part here, right? Is that it's supposed to complement the business. You can go PSA first if you want to, because maybe you want something that's powerful that you can start recording your sales effort, your marketing effort. You need marketing automation as well, but this is the challenge. You got to kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, and man, I really need to check out Halo because it sounds like it just kind of, I don't want to say is an all-in-one tool, but it is. And that's what we were getting at a little bit earlier is that, as you mature, talking about this operational maturity conversation,
Mhm.
you may move away and start to break, some of those individual components into dedicated pieces of software. Just highlighting a few comments from Ari again, talking about number two, he thinks would end up being a contractor because he doesn't want employees. It sounds reasonable. Justin's popping in. What's up, Justin? His number two was an appointment setter. Sounds fantastic to me. Like, get the
See,
sales. That's the
so
lifeblood of
it's
the
someone who
business.
can
Yeah.
actually help him, right? Like I need someone to kind of like
Yes.
because I'm terrible at tracking my time. I'm terrible at setting my own appointments. Well, maybe that's going to be my number two, right? So.
Yeah. Definitely kind of compliment. Plug to r/enable from Lisa. Hey, Lisa. Justin mentioned OpenRMM. And then Ari, I think, had used that as well. Um, Jason, this has been a lot of fun. I do want to go a little bit into some of this AI stuff. That's the
Mm.
that's the bingo card, right? You mentioned earlier Halo does something that's AI related. Can you cover that, and then maybe we could talk about the future a little bit?
Sure, sure. So I'm going to start with Enable. Again, selfishly, only because
Yeah, do it.
we have a fantastic resource here at Enable. Her name's Nicole Reinecke, and she's been in the AI kind of industry for a very, very long time. And we've had many discussions. In fact, we're going to be doing a kind of a tech talk. It's like a webinar we're going to be hosting very, very shortly, and I'm going to get Stetson that information so that we can kind of circulate it as well. But what we're really going to be talking about is practical use cases for AI for MSPs. That's really about. Now, I'm not going to give away all the secret sauce right now, but it's one of those things where when you start looking at your tools, and I can tell you all of your vendors are thinking about AI. Why? Because it is going to change the game. And if you're going to bury your head in the sand, someone else is going to take advantage of AI and then bury you. That is just the nature of things because AI is going to be about efficiencies, right? First thing and foremost, I would say as an MSP, chatbots, right? Look at your survey data. again, this survey data is again an operational checkbox. You may not have survey data. You might not be asking your customer, were they happy with the experience from your MSP, from your technician, what have you, that engagement, right? So that's where AI is really going to help, right? It's going to be able to give a sometimes better experience. I mean, AI is evolving as we speak, and they're getting very hard in terms of being able to discern language. In fact, some are actually using slang words, um, trying to come off cool a little bit or edgy, as we might call it. So, and it's sometimes hard to track. Um, so, anyways, when you start getting in chatbots or looking at survey data, that's where I think the first forays for MSPs are going to be. However, AI in automation makes things just more smarter, right? Because again, labor is, the greatest expense for an MSP. And MSPs need to be able to do more with that labor. It's not about firing the people you have. Nobody wants to fire anybody. Even AI isn't about firing people. What it's about is with your team, it's about making it more efficient so that we can do more with less, right? AI is going to allow people to do things much easier, more safely. Whereas, sometimes when I was managing Windows NT, I'm telling you right now, if it had a database, I was crossing my fingers if that thing was coming back up because I had no idea. It was a 50-50 chance when I was patching it. You never
Oh yeah.
knew. And then 3 o'clock in the morning, because we didn't have patch tools 20 some years ago, is that when I was crossing my fingers and I got a blue screen of death, I knew right there I'm working another probably 4 to 8 hours just trying to fix this problem. So the evolution of AI is going to make things more safe, more efficient. It's going to make business owners more productive. And one other thing I want to chat on is when I went to Microsoft's first MSP summit, I went to their inaugural event uh, just outside of Seattle in Redmond. So I got to see the mothership, as I call it. So when I was there at this AI summit, they were talking about Microsoft Copilot, which is going to be embedded in all of the Microsoft things. Think like Excel or Word, right? Being able to craft language or improve, your grammar, for example. Or what if you could just ask AI really quickly, listen, I've got 4 rows. Can you turn that into a pivot table? I hate
Oh
pivot.
my
I
God.
hate,
Yes.
dude, I hate
Yes.
pivot tables because I can never do them right to start with. I have to play with it to get everything to kind of line
Same.
up. What
Same.
if what if AI could do that? Now, I can't promise that Microsoft Copilot is going to do that out of the box, but those are the efficiencies that are going to be gained within these business applications, right? So it's going to be absolutely huge within, I say, the next 2 to 5 years. In that,
Oh, 6 months.
well, we'll
My
see.
timeline's shorter.
Yes,
It depends on the industry too.
right.
But yeah, I think what you're getting at is widespread adoption.
Yes.
Yeah, Jason, you highlighted a lot of really exciting stuff on the AI side. That yeah, I'm super amped for. I saw Nicole Reinecke, I think is who you mentioned. We'll definitely get the details for that
Mhm.
conversation. I've been following this space very closely too, and I guess there's a really good quote too, right? I think it was an ad for like an AI newsletter, but it was something like, "You're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who leverages AI." Which is just more, motivation to learn about these different things and
Mhm.
find out how you can augment your business. Um, wow, we've chatted about a lot, but what else? Yeah, one thing I'll just drop as a side comment here
Mhm.
on the AI discussion. I encourage folks to look into AI agents. If you haven't seen this, it's kind of like ChatGPT, but you can assign multiple ChatGPTs or chatbots to kind of be a team that have different roles. So, for instance, if you were going to write a newsletter, you could have one be like the editor, the writer, and the
Yeah.
manager, and they would all interact with each other. But where it gets crazy is you can hook up outside tooling to them to interact with, web services and different things, and perhaps your PSA. I think very soon, if not
Right.
now. But yeah, I'm excited for the future.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute game changer. Like I don't think it'll move 6 months kind of fast, but um, people will definitely improve on these processes. over, I would say, the next 6 months to 2 years, right? Like things are going to
Yeah.
get much more efficient, and these use cases are going to become much more adoptable, right? Like, hey, man, I've got agents, AIs now talking to each other, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
that's pretty huge, right? I'm not saying Skynet kind of huge, but it's it's kind of,
Close.
well, maybe it gets a little scary when you start going down the rabbit hole, um, and we won't go there today. But it's one of those things where at least in the next 5 years, it's going to be just a game changer.
Yeah, I think that's certain. Well, cool, Jason. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think our audience has as well. Where can folks go on the internet to either chat with you about PSAs or learn more about PSAs?
Well, my colleague Lisa is also kind of sitting in the chat, and she's watching this, I'm sure. So I'll give her a plug, and also mention kind of our shared community at Reddit. So if you want to ask questions, if you want to get come in there and chat, a lot of our partners come in there to kind of ask about certain functionality, or if they're having a problem, or what have you. But if you want to come in and start asking questions around AI, let's chat. So that would be a perfect arena for that particular conversation.
Yeah, sounds great. Let's rock it. Jason, I again always enjoy these conversations. I think we could go off a rabbit hole into Skynet and Terminator and even business processes. I think we can make pretty exciting. But I think we'll call it there. It's been a great conversation. Encourage
Cool.
folks to check back in with us as we do these live streams with Enable. And of course, check out the subreddit. It's right here, reddit.com/r/enable.
Right there.
All
Yep.
right. I'm out. Enjoy your afternoon,
Okay.
Jason. See
Thank
ya.
you.